share. So we've got the recording happening here. I'm Shannon Dill. I'm with University of Maryland Extension, and I'm a county agent on the Eastern Shore of Maryland. I have a background in farm economics and farm management and work while I'm a county agent. My main program area has been in farm financial management and accounting things. So one of the topics over the years I've presented on a number of different financial topics from enterprise budgets to cash flow. And we're kind of going to go back to the basics today, which is setting up that farm chart of accounts. So this to me is really the basis. If you're thinking like a triangle, this is like the basic need that you need to have when you're starting to create a financial record keeping system. And we hop very quickly into enterprise budgets or farm tax information or cash flow budgets. But really, the farm chart of accounts is your basis. To me, it's your home base when you're putting your finances together. So a chart of accounts is really a systematic listing of all the account names. Some people use numbers in your general ledger. So this is how you name or categorize your income and expenses. Mostly, there are some other ones that you would bring in and include, but it is that system. And I like that word systematic because it really has you think about how you're going to organize and the information that you need to manage your financial data, to be able to make decisions on the farm, to be able to report as necessary, to be able to forecast and plan and estimate. So that chart of accounts is really, really important. And it groups income and expenses into meaningful categories. So it goes from paying the feed store to supplies or feed or fertilizer or seed. So it really groups them and breaks them down from not just the vendor, but what that charge, what that income and expense was for. So before we get in, we are going to dig into a couple chart of accounts. Before we do that, I do want to emphasize the benefits. It really facilitates the financial reporting and analysis of your records. And if you're just starting out or you've been in business 10 years, you may regularly want to go back to that chart of accounts and make sure that it's designed to be able to help you do your regular reporting as well as make decisions on the farm. It will help budget and forecast things. So you can look forward, how much did I spend last year? How much am I planning to spend this year? I need to make a budget for the mortgage or the feed or fertilizer. I've been in the feed store lately. We have a number of animals at our farm, and every time I go, it seems like it's a little bit more expensive there. So it is really, keeping good records has helped me plan for what I'm going to be spending and making decisions on, making some additional purchases or thinking about equipment and other things. It also ensures consistency in financial record keeping. So having a good chart of accounts and a good process really helps that consistency to be able to look back. And if you organize appropriately, you can very quickly find the information that you need. So if you're going, what did I spend last year on feed, or what did I spend last year on utilities or insurance? Having that chart of accounts, you can click a couple buttons and you've got that information. All right, so there's a couple account types, and this is if you're using a financial record keeping software that it will be divided into. So in a system, QuickBooks is probably one of the most popular financial record keeping software, and I do have some screenshots of that. But there's assets, so those are resources or items that you own by the farm. There's liabilities, which are obligations that the farm owes, and those can be added into and put into a chart of accounts. There's also equity, so that's the interest in the farm. That's what the owner owes. Oftentimes it's some type of savings line. And then probably the ones that you're most are are most common or that you think of the most is the revenue. So that's your income and your expenses, and that's your costs. So we're going to talk mostly about the revenue and expenses side of things, but the assets, liabilities, and owner's equity can be added into the chart of accounts. And this is very helpful if you're using a system such as QuickBooks. It's something your accountant can help you with. And it's very beneficial when you're trying to create the farm financial statements, to have those pieces into the software as well. So when you're setting up asset accounts, some examples of that are cash, accounts receivable, any inventory items, equipment, and land. Those are some of the things that you might set up within assets. For liabilities, it would be accounts payable, so money that you're waiting to receive, or you're waiting to pay, loans payable, your mortgage, and possibly any accrued expenses. So you would set those liability accounts up into like a QuickBooks account, and I'll show you how those kind of line items are shown in the chart of accounts. The owner's equity accounts are retained earnings, capital contributions. We don't see those as often in there, but sometimes people may use inventory or certain kinds of CDs and that type of thing into the equity accounts. Most popular are your revenue accounts. These are the ones that you're definitely going to need to track as you're reporting for your tax purposes, as you're creating your cash flow statement. So that's crop or livestock sales, any government payments or custom work that's done would be considered a revenue account or an income account that's coming into your finances. And then this is an example. I think it's really important to at least go back with your chart of accounts, and your basis is your Schedule F. So if you haven't downloaded this, go to the IRS webpage. I've got some links, and you can download the 2023, which is the more recent one. 2024, I don't think is posted yet. Usually that happens in the fall or winter. And this is the profit and loss from farming. So you can see here in this farm income section, if you're reporting on cash method, you can see the different areas of possible income for the farm. So you can see that these are grouped together. So sales of purchased livestock or resale of other items. Sales of livestock, produce, grains, all of that has to be combined. And so what we're going to kind of do is look at this and then work our way backwards. Look at this Schedule F and then say, what do I need to do to be able to complete this form at the end of the year accurately? So you can see here farm income, any sales, any 1099 work, all of that would be reported on that farm, this part 1 on the Schedule F, farm income. So figuring out ways in your record keeping system to be able to produce those numbers to complete this is one of your goals. And so I would say this is the bare minimum of keeping your chart of accounts. We're going to move into the expense accounts. So the examples here are seed and fertilizer, labor, equipment repairs, utilities, and insurance. And what you're going to do here is look at part 2 of the Schedule F. Again, I think it's very important that this is at least your bare minimum of accounts that you're keeping, that you're coding every expense one of these categories. All right, and there's 32 listed here, and you have some others that you can add in. So for farm expenses, you don't deduct the following. It would be personal or living expenses, expenses raising anything for you or your family, the value of animals you raised that died, inventory losses, personal losses. And so again, there is a detailed instruction page. When you go to the IRS, there's 3 really good documents that you want to be familiar with. There is the farm publication. There is the actual Schedule F, which you're seeing the screenshot here. And then there is the instructions for the Schedule F. I would highly recommend printing off, as I mentioned, the Schedule F and the instructions for the Schedule F. It will outline all of these and even talk about some of the categories here for you to enter, such as like 20 says insurance other than health. So it would be farm-related insurance expenses. See if there's another one I would want to highlight here. So there is some instructions on rent or lease. Custom hire for machine work. If you do any extra custom hire out, that you hired in for expenses, you can add that in there. So as we dig into the chart of accounts, as I mentioned, the bare minimum. So the income might be sales. So line 2 says sales of livestock, produce, grains, and other products you raised. Well, perhaps you do want to break it out into sub-accounts. You really need to sit back and think about your farm business, how you receive money and how you expense money, and how you want to track that over time. So obviously you need one number that goes into cell number 2 or line number 2, but how are you going to get there? Do you want to track, perhaps you have an egg enterprise, cut flowers, vegetables, or grain. Maybe you want to divide it out into those 4 categories. Now, remember, if you divide it out, you've got to track it that way. But perhaps you want to not lump everything together in sales. Maybe it's crops and livestock. Maybe it's spring or summer crops that you want to track. The chart of accounts will track however you want to break it down. But you need to be able to then categorize it to enter into that farm profit and loss. Another example might be perhaps I want to track bush hogging and snow removal. Maybe I want to justify buying a new bush hog mower, right? Implement. So I'm going to track bush hogging to see, how much do I make in custom hire for bush hogging a year? Maybe I want to break it down. Maybe I only do 1 or 2 snow removals a year, and I'm just going to lump everything together into custom hiring, and that would be line 7. Alternatively, we can do the same for expenses. So feed is line 16. So if you're feeding multiple kinds of livestock and you want to track those expenses, you can create those sub-accounts to track those expenses. Same with insurance. Insurance is lumped together. Maybe you want to separate out crop insurance and farm liability insurance or product liability insurance so you can track different expenses over time. Or maybe you're wanting to track that for a different reason. Maybe it doesn't make sense and you just lump it all together into farm insurance. You have one provider, you're going to pay them regardless. You review your policy every year. It doesn't matter, so you wouldn't break those down. Repairs and maintenance are line 25. So you could break them out into machinery and buildings, maybe parts and labor, any way that you would want to break them out, or you keep them lumped together. Another one is supplies. That's a very broad, broad area. Is there something that you feel like you need to track to understand where you're spending supplies at? And then the other line is categories that you could pull out that don't really fit into these others that you want to track in your chart of accounts. So every farm is going to be very different. I would definitely encourage you to go out on the internet and look at different farm charts of accounts. QuickBooks, if you selected to use that, they actually have a chart of accounts for farm and ranching, farm agriculture and ranching. So they have the Schedule F already built into their chart of accounts, and then you can modify it if you want. So there's a lot of ways to get started on this chart of accounts, but really today, what I wanted to share with you is ideas and thoughts on making it meaningful for you, easy at the end of the year, and then also accessible so you can get a number when you want to look at how much did I spend on feed, or what am I making on my egg enterprise. So that is the Schedule F and maybe ideas on a chart of accounts and sub-accounts. This is actually, and this is a little dated, we were doing a lot of QuickBooks classes a number of years ago, and we set up like a sample kind of grain farm that we were going to have. And this is what QuickBooks created for me as an account list, a chart of accounts for this grain farm. You can see some of these are unassigned, some are assigned to the Schedule F. We have what the account name is. So you can see the account name, the type of account, the description. So this was automatically done by QuickBooks, and then what the tax line where it would show up on. From there, you can create sub accounts or accounts under, or you can add and delete accounts really in this chart. So this can be very, very customized for you as you make decisions on that. And you can see here, like one example was there was grain sales, but then I wanted to track corn, soybeans, and wheat. You know, that mattered to me. That was something I would want to do. If it made sense for my farm enterprise, something I wanted to track sales on. Perhaps I crop share with someone. Maybe I want to track the farms I cash rent and farms I crop share. So you could divide it out. Maybe it's livestock enterprise, crop enterprise. So thinking about how you might divide up those income. And then insurance is another one that is sometimes easy to kind of break out and show, like, you know, you have an insurance expense and then you have crop insurance and then your farm policy. So there might be two different vendors, and perhaps I want to track those independently. Another great one, if you're using QuickBooks, is this one, Ask My Accountant. So it's your default. If you're not quite sure where to put anything, if you're not sure, you know, gosh, I don't know if I should create another sub account or its own chart of accounts, you could put it in that Ask My Accountant. And that would be an area where you can then go back to and make decisions on based, you know, especially if you're starting out and you're not sure where to put things. Have a miscellaneous category, then you can go back and look and say, you know, that really needs an other, or that's really a repair or a maintenance. It should go under that category. So again, this is a QuickBooks. This is what it downloads. If you tell it, you go through the wizard and set up, and you say, I'm an agriculture, ranching, whatever, this is what you will get from QuickBooks. And then I would definitely encourage you to have this, put those descriptions in there. Make sure that you've got your tax lines assigned. You can see I have a number unassigned down here that would need to be assigned. And then you can print this, and I'm going to say this later, but this is very helpful to have printed so you can look at it and you know where you are adding things. I say that because a number of years ago, we started an account. We just kept adding sort of accounts, like adding names, and we ended up having to really go back and clean up a lot of stuff because we were naming things differently. So maybe we abbreviated, and then we needed to go back and write it out. So, maybe the farm policy was named by the vendor, not farm policy. So having this printed and at your workstation where you do your finances is very, very helpful. And you can see here, like, we even have like tractors put in here. So I've got a fixed asset that I've added. I've got a GM truck. I've got a tractor. I've got some fixed assets that we have added in there. And again, you can modify those, which is very helpful. So all of this is customizable. So here's an example of once you start using a record keeping system, the kind of information that you can get. And so here on this left-hand side is transaction detail by account. So if I've got it in a financial record keeping system, this is example is QuickBooks, I can then run reports by account. I can also manage the dates that it shows me, what the account was, what the date was, the name, and then I've got a memo in there. So if you are keeping records, make sure you're keeping, you're adding to that memo so you can go back and understand where that is. And then there is a class, and so you can turn that on and you can see for like grain sales. If this was corn sales, if it was green corn, it would be listed there. Same with expenses. You can see down here, corn seed, it would be grains corn. Soybeans, it would be grains soybean expense. So again, this, once you start making an effort for your financial record keeping system, all of a sudden you've got a lot of data, a lot of information. There is some upfront work in getting this designed for you to fit your farm and your operation. But once you have it, you can create a lot of really great reports from that, and you get information very, very quickly. So the really cool thing is it is interactive, so I can start clicking on things. I can click on this check, it takes me to the check. I can click on insurance expense and it takes me to all the insurance expenses. So it is very interactive once you've started entering that data, if you need to go back and look at the information. Know a number of people that have had, maybe they've gotten multiple invoices or maybe they've gotten multiple bills. They can go back and say, okay, I've already paid this, or this is what I paid last year. Can we talk about this? Maybe negotiate something. Now, maybe you're not ready to jump into QuickBooks yet, and I totally understand that. So this is an example of an Excel spreadsheet that if you're a smaller farm, maybe just getting started, you maybe want to look at just using an Excel spreadsheet. And so this is a download. Most banks, if you do online banking, you can download every transaction that you had for the year. So this would be an example if you downloaded every transaction from 2020. It's got check numbers on there, so you can look back at the checks. These are point of sale, so debit cards. This is a payment, online payment. Then you can identify what account you want those to go into. And then with some Excel formulas, you can count those. So I've used the example of the formula down here. It's a sum if. So what I'm asking Excel to do is to sum columns A through F if it equals fertilizer. And so in this fertilizer category, that's how I got 205.28. I can change it to supplies or feed or repairs, and Excel will automatically, as I code each one of these expenses, it will do the summaries over here for me. Now, it's hard to go back. I can do some sorting. This is a lot more handwork. There's a lot more possibility for human error. But if you've got a handful of charges each month and it doesn't make sense to go into QuickBooks yet, or you want to wait, Excel will do something very, very similar. Again, you need to have an idea of what the account are. How are you labeling these expenses? How are you labeling, that chart of accounts here in column G is my chart of accounts for this Excel spreadsheet. All right, so 2 examples, very different ways of operating. Takes a little bit of time to set up. Takes a little bit of navigation and getting used to, but both can be very, very helpful as you're trying to complete the Schedule F or trying to even make decisions on what did I spend this year and do some comparisons year after year. All right, so we're gonna go back to just talking about some organization systems and some best practices. So figuring out how you're going to organize this chart of accounts, you really need a consistent naming or numbering system. You know, we really messed up in doing some abbreviations and different things. You know, if I start doing some using acronyms and or spelling things out or using the vendor, so you really need to figure out that naming system. Group similar accounts together, example structure, and every year auditors tell us we should number. I don't like the numbering system. Some people really like the numbers, like the 2 accounts are liabilities, 1 accounts are assets, 4 accounts are revenue. It's up to you if that's something that you would like, but what you would actually do is instead of having owners draw or like gasoline fuel, it would be numbered in like 4 gasoline and fuel. If expense account is a 4 account, it would be like 4001. And then the next account be 4002. So it's up to you if you're more of a numbers person or a naming person, how you would want to do that. Customizing the chart of accounts, really adapt it to your farm's needs. Like if you're never going to have livestock, take that out of your chart of accounts. You know, it just makes it messy. Get it out of there. You can add it if you ever needed to, but adapt it to the farm's needs. Consider the farm size and complexity. So really think if it's something that you need to track, like your cost sharing or crop sharing things, you know, maybe you do need to have some things set aside so you can run really good reports. Consider your time and what you need and want to know. In our record keeping, we talk about you can track anything. You know, you could track, you know, every purchase, every supply purchase from a certain vendor, but is that needed and is that extra time for you that you wouldn't be able to manage? And you can use those sub accounts for detailed tracking. So if I do want to track insurance or you know, maybe I want to break fuel into gas, diesel, you know, oil, whatever, you know, however you're doing it, propane, maybe I do want to divide those up. And then you want to look at implementing the chart of accounts. So review your existing financial records, you know, look back at what you have, categorize the transactions into appropriate accounts, and then setting it up into some kind of software or ledger is really, really helpful. I mean, paper and pencil works, Excel works, QuickBooks works. It really is where your comfort level is, how complex your farm is. If you've got payroll and some of the other things, I mean, you really should be thinking about QuickBooks. If you've got a handful of expenses through a very seasonal type farm enterprise, maybe it's just Excel or paper or pencil. So think about that as you're implementing the chart of accounts. And then maintain the chart of accounts. You know, your best practice is to review it and update it regularly to make sure, you know, you're using and categorizing things as you want. Maybe it's monthly when you do reconciliations. Maybe it's quarterly if you don't have a lot of expenses, or maybe it's at the end of the year when you look back and you're doing your taxes and say, you know, I really do want to track this a little bit more. Ensure accuracy in data entry. Print a copy of your chart of accounts. As I mentioned, it really helps prevent mistakes naming or double naming things. And you should reconcile your accounts monthly. Some common mistakes to avoid. Don't overcomplicate your chart of accounts. Again, maybe start out small the first year, and then you could start dividing things up a little bit more. But overcomplicated chart of accounts means you may abandon your record keeping. And you don't want to do that. We're trying to make it better. So think about how to keep it simple but detailed enough for you. Be careful with inconsistent use of account numbers or names, and don't neglect regular updates. Schedule a time to sit down at the computer that you work on your finances. Maybe it's a weekly thing, maybe it's a monthly thing that you sit down and you make those updates and go back through to make sure everything is working the way you want it to. So in conclusion, a well-organized chart of accounts, it's really helpful in your financial management of the farm. and it really helps with accurate financial reporting. So think about that as you're putting together your farm chart of accounts. I do want to recognize USDA, the Ag FTAP program. We are working nationwide with this uh, finance, tax, and asset protection education program. And this website is really amazing, ruraltax.org. Totally recommend it. There's lots of information, sample tax returns, different tax topics, a small farms tax guide. Very, very helpful as you're learning more about farm financial management and farm taxes. I'm going to add a link here as evaluation. This is part of the Ag FTAP and the Rural Tax Education Program. If you could fill those that out, that would be great. After today, I would really appreciate that. And I did want to share these resources. So farmers.gov, so USDA has some working with tax information. Iowa State has an interactive Schedule F, which is kind of cool to play with and to learn more about rural tax. I agree, Diane, it's got a lot of great information in it, so check that out, as well as the IRS publications. So I will admit 225 is pretty in depth. It's probably like 100 and some pages, but I would print off the Schedule F, look at the instructions, and then if you start to have questions, the publication 225 is a very good reference. It's also a good place if you do have questions with your accountant, check out ruraltax.org, look at the Farmer's Tax Guide, and then you can reach out to your accountant to talk with related to your farm financial plans. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. Oops, it's going to take me to the webpage. Let's see. I will be sending this recording out as well as the slide set, so you have access to these links. We've got some spreadsheets, but I would definitely start working through what that list looks like. Something similar to this is what I think the ultimate goal should be, is figuring out where it is on the Schedule F and then the different account names. Diane, we get that question a lot. So the question is recommendations on local accountants to work with or resources to find someone local. Generally, it's been word of mouth that I have heard of. We actually have an ag law team that has a list of ag lawyers, and I wish they can actually, I guess, be labeled that they have experience in ag law. I wish we could do the same for accountants. Because there are definitely nuances as you explore LLCs, assets, really finding someone that can answer your questions. So I would do a little bit of an interview, some investigation as you're working with someone to see if they can answer a couple basic questions, maybe something that's in 225, to make sure they do understand the nuances of farms and farm accounting. So that is a great question. I wish we had better directories of farm accountants for sure. All right. Are there accounting programs that are more simple than QuickBooks, but more friendly than Excel? That's a great question. I have been exploring. I know there's some like FarmWorks out there. Quicken is a little bit more user-friendly. It is more for personal and less for business use. And I think even more, it's gone to find its niche in personal accounts, not in business accounts. But I don't know if anyone on here has any experience with other record-keeping software or accounting programs. QuickBooks is very sophisticated. It has a large abandonment rate because people do leave it because it can be a little bit harder to get set up. And I believe you have to purchase the online version now and not a software download. Where does bank interest go, or does it not belong? Um, that would probably go, I'm not sure if that goes into equity or if that is more in the income that you would have that as a bank interest income. And then same with expense. Some people break out in their expenses, um, principal and interest. So it all depends on how you want to manage that interest. So I do know people that break out principal and interest payments. Ah, wait, I'm going to write that down. I have not heard of that accounting software, and it is Schedule F friendly. I would definitely make sure whatever you're using is Schedule F friendly. QuickBooks heads up with the QuickBooks sales rep I was just chatting with, their desktop software will be only available for purchase. Yep. Thereafter on the cloud only. And yes, that is correct. I've heard the same that it is going they're trying to go all online. And depending on the size of your business, if you're not doing payroll, if you're, it may not be the software. I would definitely do some investigation in the right software because it can take a lot of time to get these set up. I would also work with your bank. Many of them have, I mean, I know like our local banks do have an ag representative there, that could help with recommendations as well as even what, um, programs or resources they have. Sometimes there's a QuickBooks Pro that you could have access to. Um, I know for like mine, even just downloading the transactions or connecting the transactions. So I was doing for a while, I was keeping a personal account on Quicken. I could connect it with my bank account. It would download the transactions. I could categorize them, and it made it much faster than hand entry. So you can also work with your bank to see what they may be able to offer. Also, if you're a big debit card user, that's really nice. If you're not writing checks out of the accounting software, it's kind of nice to have the automatic point of sale downloads. The QuickBooks classes, we have not done them as much recently. We used to work with a local community college that had the QuickBooks license to be able to teach. I'm not sure if they still do, but we would definitely be willing. We would teach. We used to do a full day class. The morning was intro to QuickBooks. So if you were already using QuickBooks, don't come to that. It was more like, let's set up a chart of accounts. Let's try to write checks and do deposits. And then in the afternoon, we had a QuickBooks Pro that would come in, and he would help really go through more of like some of the interest things, some of the assets in entering those, as well as payroll. So yeah, if you have a local community college that does any kind of like workforce training, there's a lot of great online classes too. A lot of what I've learned in QuickBooks and Excel was watching a couple like tutorials on how to do that. And if anyone has other software that they're using or classes that they know of, please post those in the chat for everyone. Okay, grant application friendly accounts. Sometimes I name or alias name accounts to align with, yes. That's a great idea. And I don't know if anyone has explored using classes in QuickBooks. I've had a couple accountants say they don't like the use of classes, but we have found them very helpful. Something like a grant application where maybe, you know, it's a different kind of line item, different than your Schedule F, but you want to have that class in there. And then you can run reports based on the class. right. Any other questions for today? Or comments? I appreciate everyone's feedback. Or any best practices when setting up a chart of accounts. We've got definitely have some users on here of maybe QuickBooks or some other programs. Perfect. Perfect. Well, it's been great talking with everyone over your lunchtime. And I think we're skipping August and we'll be back in September with our series. So appreciate you joining today, and we'll be sending out the links and information soon. Thank you all.